Hello and welcome to another video review. This is Empire Earth for PC. This is a real-time strategy game developed by Stainless Steel Studios and released by Sierra Entertainment, which later became Vivendi Universal Entertainment, in 2001. And it's interesting because Rick Goodman, who was one of the founders of Ensemble Studios, worked on the project. He was the founder of Stainless Steel Studios after he left Ensemble. And that's interesting because this game has often been compared to Age of Empires. They have a pretty similar premise. A lot of the gameplay elements are extremely similar, if not basically exactly the same. So the question becomes, is it really as good as people say it is? Is it really a true kind of successor to Age of Empires? Well, let's find out. Well, the visual department was certainly not lacking at the time. I mean, it didn't look amazing by any stretch of the imagination. It was one of those early 3D games that ended up not aging all that well. Textures are low res, animations are pretty clunky looking, they seem kind of awkward and kind of robotic, I guess is the best term. Modeling is really kind of crappy. It seems like they tried to go for a semi-2D look almost. It's really weird the way some of the buildings and such look, because you'll see them and they look like a flat texture sometimes, but you know it's a 3D model, so it just looks really odd. And that was one of the symptoms of those early 3D games. They didn't really look all that great, and they really didn't age well. So this is one of those prime examples. Sound design in general is pretty decent. The music's kind of okay. There's nothing really noteworthy about it. It's just kind of your standard, I guess, conquest kind of music. It's nothing that's really too bombastic, nor is it anything that's really particularly moody or atmospheric. The voice acting is entirely in English, which is weird. I didn't think the ancient Greeks spoke English. Interesting. Even better, it's an American accented English. It's not. They didn't even try to make it like a British accented English. No, American accented. It's kind of annoying. And I mean, when you're in the prehistory kind of epic thing, you just kind of grunt, and well, like your characters all just kind of sit there and go Whereas when you get later on, they start speaking English, and it's like, okay, that's kind of silly. But voice acting itself's not that bad. It's just jarring to have every civilization speaking English. That's just kind of weird. As for the sound effects themselves, they do their job. That's really all they needed to do. There's nothing really noteworthy about them. But the sound design in general just kind of works, and so did the visuals at the time, but they really haven't aged well. Now, where this game really does distinguish itself is in the gameplay itself. It really doesn't have much of a storyline. It does have, like, say, the Age of Empires games, a series of different campaigns. You have like a tutorial campaign, as well as the Greek, English, German, and Russian campaigns, each of which take place during a different part of history, or in the case of Empire Earth, the future. The German campaign is basically during World War I. English is basically the Norman conquest, which was somewhere around the 1047 up through 1066 and so on and so forth. The Greek campaign is obviously ancient Greece, but the Russian campaign is interesting because it begins in 2018, and so it's all this futuristic stuff that you kind of start in the pretty modern era, but it progresses and you get stuff like cyborgs and robots. And that stuff's kind of cool because you never really saw a historical real-time strategy game that did that kind of thing. You do actually have several different epochs to go through this game. It starts up in prehistory and goes all the way up to, I believe it's the Nano Age. But it's just kind of odd the way that works. But it's kind of cool because all this stuff just it wasn't in previous historical real-time strategy games, and there was a lot of really kind of precise eras in this game. Like you do have one that's basically just the Renaissance itself, as opposed to say like the Imperial Age or something like that. The problem I had with it was it takes way too long to do anything. I'm sure a lot of you will disagree with me here. But if you go up an epic, it takes a lot of resources to do that. I mean, that was the case in previous games like Age of Empires as well. And I know I'm comparing this a lot to Age of Empires, but they were really kind of going for that feel, and they just completely failed miserably on it. This game feels nothing like Age of Empires. It is definitely a completely different style of play. For one, while the units did have this kind of paper, rock, scissors effect in Age of Empires, you could generally do well with pretty much anything. You didn't have to be bound by, say, swordsmen are good against buildings and pikemen are good against cavalry. You weren't bound by that. You could still use them in different roles if you had to. Empire Earth, strict paper, rock, scissors. You can basically only use infantry against certain things. You can only use archers against certain things. Only use cavalry against certain things. Otherwise, they just completely fail miserably, and that really just became a problem. Especially when resource gathering takes so long. I ended up having an absolutely massive force of citizens and not much else. Because that's how many people it requires to actually produce enough resources to do anything. And it just takes forever. It took me about 2 hours to get up to a point where in Age of Empires, for instance, I would have won an hour earlier. That should tell you something. And, I mean, Age of Empires is four ages. Empire Earth is something like 12 epics, I think. It's somewhere around in there. It's like 8 to 10 or 12 epics, somewhere around in there. I can't remember exactly which, because whenever I play this game, I just kind of set it to whichever epic I want to play in, and just go from there, because it's way too much of a hassle to go up in the epics. And I'm not really sure why they did that. I mean, maybe they were going for the more scenario route, but the random maps and deathmatch and such, when you're doing that that particular epic spanning stuff, it really does become very problematic, because the AI doesn't help either. I mean, it seems like the AI can go from completely retarded on up to completely impossible. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. There's a lot of variation in there. And it seems like certain civilizations are just more overpowered than others. I mean, you do get to customize civilizations as well. They each get different bonuses and detriments to different things as well. So that's kind of nice. But there's no uniqueness to this game at all. That's one of the major problems I have with it. Civilizations in this game all draw from the same unit pool. It's like in the original Age of Empires. There aren't unique units. There's no unique techs. You just get access to basically all the same simplistic units, and that's kind of it. There's really not a lot to differentiate the different factions apart from this one has a bonus to this thing, this one has a bonus to this thing. And so there's not a lot of variety in this game, unless maybe you play it multiplayer, but I don't really recommend it because, well, all the problems I've highlighted here. It just doesn't feel like a great strategy game. It feels like kind of a micromanagement game more than anything else. And that was one of the major problems I had with it, because it kind of just sucked all the fun out of it. When I was playing this, I was hoping for a game that would be at least as good as, say, Age of Empires 1, but it wasn't. And it had one of the founders of Ensemble working on it. It should have been great. But I was horrendously disappointed with this thing. I went in there thinking it was going to be at least good, and I was horribly disappointed, and I found out it really isn't. So I really can't understand why people like it so much. If you do like this game, feel free to explain it to me, because I really can't understand it. I fail to see how this game is really deep in the strategic element. I fail to see how taking so long to get all these resources together is supposed to be fun. I fail to see how everything being really generic is supposed to be fun. So overall, I really can't recommend this game. I give it a 2 out of 5. Thanks for watching.